Hey guys, welcome back to Heritage Hollow Homestead. Today I am getting ready and making space for my fall garden, and I wanted to take you along so that we can talk about a few things that will make your fall garden more successful, and a few words of encouragement and a few tips. Alright, so let's get going. Alright guys, so I'm wheeling out some of my little plant starts here that I started weeks ago when I made that other video about seed starting for fall planting. If you haven't watched it yet, go back. It's probably maybe even the last video that I made. Watch that first, because that's really going to tell you and give you a lot of information about what types of things that you can start in your fall garden, and how to plan out your seed starting, what to plant as transplants, how much time you'll have depending on your grow zone, all of that. So I covered all that in the last video, and now I have my own. This is just a few of it. I got lots more where this came from, of my own seed starts that need to be planted soon. If I gotta get these in the ground, because I only have so much time before the first frost comes. I know that sounds crazy because it's August, right? I'm burning up out here. It's like 98 degrees. Who's thinking about fall? Well, I am. Because even though it may seem like fall is a long time away, in the plant world and growing, you know, plants don't just grow overnight. These things take time, and I am running out of available time in my before the first frost comes here. Okay, so I've got to get these in the ground. So the problem is that you can look around here, very messy, but for the most part, see one empty bed there. I mean, my garden is full. It is totally full of plants. So how do I make space for these when my garden's already full and everything's producing? And so we're going to talk about that. I'm going to give you some planting tips and a few other things. Like I've harvested my corn. I have it back here, and I'm my corn stalks. I'm saving those for fall decorating. So I'm thinking ahead there, saving those back so I can make a cute little fall decor on my porch, or maybe out front of my house or something with some hay bales. It'll be cute. Anyway, so I have those. I did pull my corn. That gave me a little bit extra space, but not a lot, because under my corn was okra growing. So once I pulled the corn, the okra is still growing, and it is out in there. So that didn't even free up a lot of space even there. So where am I going to find the space to plant hundreds of fall plant starts? I'm going to tell you where. I'm just going to rip up this stuff. I know, that sounds crazy, right? But what has happened is it is very hot here. We went from being very dry to too much rain to being very dry and super hot weather in between. And that has really put a lot of stress on my plants. And a lot of these plants are also, some of them are just coming, either one, they're coming time to harvest anyway, or they've just given me all they've got to give. Like my beans, for instance. I've gotten so many harvests from my bush beans, they're not really going to give me much more. So I might as well pull those up and start back over with something fresh, okay? So if you're like me though, this can be hard, because when you look around and you see that your garden's already totally full and it's looking pretty, and then you know when you pull it all out it's going to just be empty and look sad. It's not going to look like you've done any work at all, and once you've put so much work into it, it's almost like you hate to get out there and pull up the plants because it's just, you've worked so hard to grow them, right? But it is a just necessary thing to have to do, is to make room for the new stuff, okay? So that is what I'm going to be doing. I'm not pulling up everything. There are several things that I will be pulling up, and here's how I make my decision on what can stay and what will grow, okay? Some things they've just quit producing, and I know that they're just past their time, like my cucumbers. It's hot out, they've been stressed, they've given me so many cucumbers. I mean, I've had hundreds of cucumbers, okay? So they have done their job. They've done everything I asked them to do, and they are just, they're just looking sad. It's time for them to go, so I'm going to pull those up. If you have cucumber plants that are still going strong and giving you a couple of cucumbers here and there, it might be worth it to just fertilize them well, feed them well, and see if you can help them push through. But if your leaves are dying back, looking brown, if it's starting to look bad at all, the leaves are, go ahead and pull it up and start new, okay? My tomato plants, some of my heirloom plants, they produce really early on, like my Cherokee purples, for instance. They were the first tomato plants to give me tomatoes, which also means they're going to be the first tomato plants to probably start to die back, which in this case has been pretty true. So I'm going to be pulling those up. Actually, I started pulling them up. That's what you saw in the beginning of the video. They only have a few tomatoes on each plant. They're green. They've been kind of at a standstill. They're just not producing any new blooms. And so I know it's just going to be such a struggle to try to keep those going. And I got to have space from somewhere because I grow in raised beds. So because those aren't producing heavily anymore, I'm pulling those up. I have other tomato plants like my Roma tomatoes that are heavy with tomatoes. Those are going to stay because they're proven to me they are earning their keep in their spot. So I'm basically going to go through my garden, look at everything. If it's time for it to be harvested, I'm going to harvest it. If it's given me everything that I think it should have given me, I'm going to pull it out, like my cucumbers. There are things that I've already harvested, like my corn, because it was time. My potatoes I harvested yesterday. I've got some free space there. My lettuce is all bolted and went to seed, so I pulled those a few weeks ago, and I'd already started seed back in their spot. So I already have little baby lettuce and kale and such as that. So basically I'm just going through my garden, deciding what do I realistically, I want to be realistic about this and not just hopeful. What do I realistically think the amount of produce I would gain from keeping it versus how much more produce could I potentially gain if I pull it out and plant a whole new crop. Weigh that out, and usually by this time of year most of the things they can just go, because I've got to have this room to plant these new plants, okay? So I want to encourage you, first of all, even if you're emotionally attached to those plants, if they're not giving you a lot of fruit right now, pull them up. Pull them up so that you can, they're not going to give you a whole bunch more harvest. Say you leave that tomato plant, it may give you 10 more tomatoes between now and the end of September, versus pulling it up and planting in its spot a broccoli that will for sure give you a broccoli harvest, or in its place planting kale, which will give you greens all the way into winter. You're going to get more harvest in the long run if you go ahead and pull it up, plant something new. Okay, so here's your encouragement, here's your permission slip. Get in there and just yank the stuff out. Okay, put it in your compost pile. If it's something that is safe to feed to your animals, like green bean plants or cucumber plants or lettuce that's bolted, feed that to your animals. If it's things like potatoes or tomatoes, don't feed that to your animals. Just put that in the compost pile, because those can be poisonous to some animals, like goats. So pull them up, compost it. Start making some food for your garden for next year with those old plants, and let's get some new plants in the ground, which is where I'm at right now. And I want to just give you a few tips on when you're getting ready to plant those new plants, okay? Okay, so I've got me some pumpkins here. These are Connecticut field pumpkins. These take about 100 days to come to maturity. I started these a month ago, so you know we're already 30 days into their growing, somewhere around in there. It took a little while for them to germinate, and they are ready to be. What I really want to talk about is when you're getting ready to plant your transplants, my first tip is going to be you've got to harden them off. So say you started these seeds indoors. I started these on my porch, so they were not in direct sunlight. If you started your own seeds and you started them indoors, you cannot just take them outside and just plop them in the ground. The sun will fry them because their leaves are not sturdy enough to withstand full sun, okay? Their leaves are kind of like our skin. They have to build up, they have to build up to be able to be out in the sun all day. Kind of like, almost like they get like their own little type of suntan, okay? The leaves will start to get thicker and they'll get a darker color, but you have to do that gradually. So I'm going to, these are actually in a wheelbarrow, which is really easy, so they're under a tree right now, and I can come out here in the morning and I can just push them out like that right there in the sunlight, watch them for a few hours, and then just pull them back up under the shade. And then tomorrow or the next day, whatever, I can do that for like 3 hours, and then the next day 4 or 5 hours, and then the next day 8 hours, and then the next day I'll be able to just plant them out and they'll be strong enough that they won't kill over and die. This is especially important right in the middle of the heat of summertime. The sun is strong, it's very hot out. That can stress baby plants out anyway, so you want to make sure that you harden off those seedlings before you plant them. Now, if you are planting things that you're going to put seeds straight in the ground, you don't have to worry about that. Just make sure if you're putting seeds directly in the ground that they have time to come to harvest before your first frost date. And I talked about in the last video, but in order to do that, you would look up how many days to harvest on your seed package. Let's say like bush beans. I have some bush beans in here. They take about 60 days to come to harvest. Make sure that you have 60 days between today's date and Google your first frost date with your zip code. Mine is like October something. I have plenty of time to plant these, okay? I have way more than 60 days left before my first frost date, so those are safe. I can plant those. I could start those from seed right now and they would be fine. And so you want to do that with each plant. Make sure you're going to have time for those to come to a harvest before your first frost, or plan to cover them with a frost cover of some sort if you are cutting it close, okay? So that's my first tip. My second tip is going to be when you do plant your fall plant starts, to water them a lot. Water them in the evening, water them very early in the morning. It is very stressful for new plants when you first plant them. On top of the fact we are planting, it's not like springtime when you plant spring plants and it's nice and mild and cool out. And you plant, when you plant plants in the springtime, it's much milder out and it's not nearly as stressful on the tiny baby plants. When you're planting out your fall plant starts, you're planting them in August and September. It's still very hot out and it's going to be very stressful for them. The only way to combat that stress is to, one, make sure they are fully hardened off like we just talked about, and the other way is to make sure they have lots of water. And we don't want to drown them or give them root rot, but we'll make sure they have ample amount of water for that first 3 or 4 weeks every day to make sure that you are cutting down on the stress of those plants, okay? Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about when you're getting ready to plant your plants into your garden is going to be the fact that right now they're going to grow fast, but as you get into September and the 1st of October, the days get shorter and cooler. That is going to slow down your plants, okay? For example, and I've tried this before, corn takes certain varieties about 90 days to come to harvest, but that's if you're planting it in spring when it's warm and it's growing into the summertime. When we plant them in the summertime, they'll start to grow very nicely, but then as it gets into the cool weather and shorter days, that corn is going to slow down. So while during an ideal setting, like planting in spring and harvesting in summer for corn, it will take 90 days. It may take longer for those plants to come to harvest if your fall ends up being cool or cooler than normal. That's going to slow down how fast your plants are going to grow. What will actually happen is they'll kind of grow and they'll just kind of stop growing when it's cool out, and then the next warm day they'll just grow a little bit, and then they'll stop when it gets cool again, and they'll just grow a tiny little bit. So you will see a bigger fluctuation in growth rates for fall planting than you would summertime, because the weather is a little more unpredictable. So you may want to give yourself a cushion. Actually, not may, you should give yourself a cushion when you're planting things, especially things that take longer. If you're cutting your frost date time very close, you really don't want to do that unless you're going to, like I said, plan to cover it with a frost cover. You want to give yourself some wiggle room when you're planning out what to plant. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk to you about is just the importance of not leaving any empty spaces in your garden as fall approaches, okay? And the way you're going to do that is when it comes time to harvest something. And I know there are two different types of plants. You have plants that you harvest everything all at once, and then you have an empty space. And then there are plants that you harvest from continually, like peppers or tomatoes or cucumbers, that will be there for a while. But especially the ones that are like a potato. Let's see here, let me scoot around here. Like right behind me, I have an empty bed right there. Excuse the messes, I have not weed eated yet, but I have an empty bed there because I just harvested all of my potatoes in that bed. And so I immediately am coming back and planting another round of potatoes right there. Like literally the very next day, I added some compost and I went ahead and I added my new potatoes back in there so I can immediately get that second crop. Now, the one trick there is to make sure that you have enough time to grow that other crop in that bed. So I harvested potatoes, and I said hey Google, how many days till October? I think 26, something like that, my first frost date. It told me how many days, and that told me it was over 90 days, which told me I have time to plant another round of potatoes if I planted them right away. So I immediately put my potatoes in there, and that way I'm not wasting a single day. I already have those in there and planted. Also, right here behind me, which is messy, excuse me for the little bit of messiness, but this side of this had been carrots that I planted back very early, like May. Planted these in May. They're right about time to harvest. They got a few, like 2 more weeks left there. Got 2 or 3 more weeks. They need fed a little bit, and I think that they'll be ready very soon. The other side have been radishes. The radishes have already been harvested because they grow very fast, and I've already reseeded back immediately with more carrots. You can see those growing right here, these little baby ones. And then when the bigger ones, once I harvest those, I will sow some more carrot seed there, and those will start to grow, and that way I'm not leaving any spaces, and this carrot bed will be sort of succession planted 3 times, okay? This was the first half, then this will be the second, and then that will be the last. And so I'm not leaving any empty spaces there. Over here on the other side, right behind me, let me get this little weed pulled out of the way. I have had celery growing, which if you've ever grown celery, you know that takes a while. So this celery should be ready to harvest soon, and we have been harvesting some around the edges of it. But right here in the empty space has been, right here it was kale. That kale, when it got super hot out, it had grown past its time, been growing like since April. I went ahead and pulled it up, and I replanted kale back immediately, and as you can see, we have some nice little baby kale growing there. But I did not leave that space empty. I immediately came back and planted something else. Now, you don't always have to come back and plant the exact same thing back, because you may not have time. But I'll show you one more example of something really quick. Okay. Behind me, I have sweet potatoes on the bottom, and up this trellis, we have pole beans, okay? My sweet potatoes will not be ready to harvest till like the last day of August. once I harvest those, I'll have no choice but to go ahead and pull down these beans. I'm sure the beans will be done by then too. But I'll pull all of this up, and it'll basically be the first week of September. So I won't have a lot of time between then and my first frost date, you know, maybe 45 days. So I will not be able to come back in here and plant just anything. So I'm going to look at what's a really short growing crop that I could put in here. I'll probably put in radishes. That's what I already have written down to plant in there. Now I have 2 more beds just like this with sweet potatoes and beans. They are right there with the 2 teepees of beans. For those, because they'll be the same, I'll harvest them at the same time. For the other beds, I don't want 3 beds of radishes. We don't love radishes really a lot. They're just something extra to add to our salads. I may do beets in one, and I may do kale in another one, because I don't have to worry about my first frost date with kale. I know it's going to grow just fine into December or January. Or I may come back on one of them and go ahead and plant cabbage, and then just once it gets really cool out, I can just cover that cabbage with a row cover and let it continue to grow. But what I cannot do is come back and plant something like a pumpkin. I can't come back and plant a pumpkin there. Pumpkins take 100 days. I won't have 100 days. I can't come back and plant potatoes there because I will not have time. So that's how you manage your spaces and get the maximum amount of harvest, the maximum amount of fruit from your garden in the minimal amount of space, is by using every single day of your grow season available, and even extending that with those row covers. So you just got to do a little bit of planning ahead. I keep a little notebook. I have my garden beds drawn out in it, and I keep notes of what's growing there now and what day it's supposed to harvest. Here's my last tip. One way I keep up with all of this, and my garden's not huge, but it still can be a lot of dates and things to remember, is that one way I keep up with it is I plug in little reminders on my phone calendar. It's pretty easy. So like, let's say I planted the sweet potatoes in May, which I did, whatever that day was. I go ahead and I say, hey Google, what's 110 days from today? And it'll tell me. Well, it told me, obviously, sometime at the end of August. I don't remember the exact day. I immediately took that date, took my phone calendar out, let's say it's August 29th, and I went to August 29th and I set myself a reminder that said harvest sweet potatoes. And then from that day, I went ahead and counted forward to my frost date while I was already doing it, and I saw that, you know, I only have, let's say, 45 days-ish. What can I go ahead and plant there? And I decided radishes. So on August 29th on my phone, an event will pop up and it will say, harvest sweet potatoes, plant radishes in place. And that way I know that, like, I do all that planning in the winter time, and that way it takes a lot of stress off of me to try to decide the who's and what's it's of shuffling the garden around when it's the busy season of harvesting and canning and preserving and just all the things, and school starting back, and we homeschool, so all those extra things. I don't have time to do all that planning right now, so I do that in the winter, and then I plug it all into my phone, and my phone reminds me, which is awesome. And super easy way to just make sure that you can squeeze in extra crops. So like if you planted radishes in March and you knew what day your harvest day was going to be, say it was mid-May or the 1st of May or whatever, then in May you can make yourself a note, harvest radishes, replant tomatoes, or replant sweet potatoes or green beans, whatever. And then you would count out that harvest date to the next. Say you planted tomatoes, and actually let's say potatoes, because that's the set time to harvest those. So you went from May to mid-September, and that's when you would harvest your potatoes, and then you'd only have 30 days maybe left, and you're like, what would I grow here? So then I'd probably plant kale or something that wouldn't have to worry about that frost date. And that's a really easy way for every garden bed to plan out exactly what to plant there, so you can use up all that space instead of If you don't plan, you're going to have a hard time having things ready to put back in its spot sometimes. So that will also help you know when to start your seeds and such as that. You can look out on your calendar and be like, oh man, I'm supposed to plant pumpkins, or say you want to plant pumpkins. You can just go from seed. You could go ahead and look up the days to harvest, which is usually about 100 to 110 days. Count back from your first frost date back 110 days and write that day on your calendar as last available day to plant pumpkins. Then I would usually go back 2 weeks even further before that and give myself some wiggle room for those pumpkins, and I would put another date that would say plant pumpkins now. And then, you know, give yourself a week or two to actually go buy the seeds or get them in the mail and actually get them in the ground. That way if your frost comes early or, you know, something happens, you got a little extra time there. So that is how I plan out the fall garden in order to use up all my spaces and always have something ready to just plug right back in to that empty spot. So those are the basics of what I'm doing. And I'll tell you really quick what I'm planting. I am, let's see here, I got potatoes in there. I've got carrots that I showed you. I've got another bed of carrots. I'm going to be leaving my cherry tomatoes and my jalapenos. Be leaving all my peppers. They're just really getting started right now. I'll be planting some of the little mini pumpkins that are really cute, that are different colors. I have some different pie pumpkins I'm getting in the ground today. I have a second round of bush beans, lots of little marvel peas. I'm going to have some snow peas back on my teepees. We have kale and lettuce and spinach that's already growing, that I've already started from seed a few weeks ago. We'll be planting some beets, some radishes, some mustard greens, Swiss chard. I'm going to be planting that today. Cabbage, broccoli, and red cabbage, regular cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower. I don't know if I'm planting Brussels sprouts or not. I haven't decided on that yet or not. The big Connecticut field pumpkins, planting some of those. And trying to think of what else. Oh, squash. I'm doing a second round of squash and zucchini and cucumbers. So I'm excited about that. And I think that is it for right now, which is a lot. So I got to make a lot of room, which means I got a lot of more plants to pull out. And it keeps thundering like it could rain anytime. So I guess I need to get busy. So I have a lot of this stuff I've got to figure out what to pull out and what not to, and where I'm going to squeeze all this in. So I got to get busy. You guys need to get busy too. You need to make a plan, plant some fall stuff. Even if you only have a short amount of time, you could plant radishes, beets, kale, spinach, lettuce, greens, and have some healthy greens to eat all winter long. You could possibly squeeze in some cabbage or some carrots or something if you could cover those, if you get some row covers. So no matter where you are, you still have time to plant something. I know you do. So go find your first frost date, count backwards to today, see how many days you have left to grow, and then find you some seeds or plants that you can go ahead and plant and get started growing that fall garden. And don't forget to just, if you need to make room, here's your permission. Pull up that stuff and make room for the fall garden. I love fall gardening. I think you're going to also. I hope you guys have a good day. I'll see you soon. Bye. One last thing. If you have not subscribed yet, hit the subscribe button, and please, if you liked the information in this video, hit the like button. And I'll be doing seed saving videos, and I actually already have those made. I just got to upload them, so you may see those before you even see this video. So hope you guys have a good day. Blessings.